At exactly 5:09 in the morning, the side door of a lakeside home in Austin's Westlake neighborhood swung open with the careful, practiced quiet of a man who believed that silence could stand in for innocence. Declan Marsh stepped inside and rolled his shoulders back, loosening the knot of his tie as the first gray light of a Texas dawn crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The surface of Lake Austin was silver and still beyond the glass, unreadable like everything he'd been counting on staying that way. He unclipped his tag hewer and set it on the entry table without a sound. His jacket still carried a scent that didn't belong in this house, something floral, high-end wrong. He took one step forward into the living room. Crunch. Declan stopped. Beneath the sole of his dress shoe lay the nose cone of a model rocket kit, the hand assembly kind with real balsa wood fins and a motor casing you had to load yourself. He'd ordered it online 3 weeks ago, promising Noah they'd build it together on a Sunday. It had been waiting in its box half-assembled ever since. Except now it was on the floor and the fuselage was cracked down the middle. The fins were bent. The living room lamp was still on. On the couch, tucked under a fleece throw with the University of Texas Longhorn on it, Noah lay asleep in the clothes he'd worn to school the day before. One small hand rested open near his chin. On the coffee table beside him, placed there with the kind of deliberate care that only children manage, square-centered, weighted with meaning, was a folded piece of notebook paper. Declan picked it up. 4 words in careful second-grade handwriting. I don't need it. No scribble. No anger. Just certainty. You missed bedtime. Clara stood in the kitchen doorway. She was holding a mug of coffee she hadn't touched in hours, still wearing the cardigan she'd put on after Noah fell asleep. She wasn't crying. She wasn't accusing. She was watching him the way someone watches a thing they've already decided about. Declan opened his mouth. Client dinner. Emergency call from the investors in Dallas. Traffic on 360. The words assembled themselves automatically the way they always did, and then they just stopped somewhere between his chest and his throat. Because for the first time, the house didn't feel like it belonged to him. Clara walked past him without brushing his arm. You can put the rocket in the recycling, she said, calm as weather. He took it apart himself. Declan glanced down at the broken fuselage. He waited up, he asked, keeping his voice low. Clara nodded once. Until 11:14. He flinched. At 11:14, he had been ordering a second round at the Four Seasons rooftop bar. He wanted to show you how far he'd gotten on the assembly, she continued. He'd figured out the fin alignment without the instruction sheet. Declan looked at the cracked casing. He figured it out without me. I told him I had a late client dinner, Declan said. Clara's eyes met his, steady, unreadable. He told me he knows what that means now. A long silence settled between them like something physical. What does that mean? Declan asked, an edge creeping into his voice despite himself. Clara didn't raise hers. It means he's old enough to know when someone chooses something else. You're putting ideas in his head. No, she said softly. You are. From the couch, a small shift. Noah stirred, blinking into the lamplight. His eyes found his father first. For one unguarded second, something flickered there, hope, or the last edge of it. Hey, buddy, Declan said quickly, forcing warmth into his tone. I brought you something. It was a lie. He had nothing. Noah sat up slowly. He looked at the broken rocket on the floor, then at the note still folded in Declan's hand. I know, Noah said quietly. I waited. I'm sorry. The meetings ran. Noah shook his head. Not dramatic, not upset, just done. It's okay, he said. I don't need it anymore. He slid off the couch and walked toward his room without another word. No door slam. No tears. Just the soft sound of small feet on hardwood, and then quiet. Clara watched her son disappear down the hall. Then she set her cold mug on the counter and went to bed. Declan stood alone in the lamplight, the note in his hand, the broken rocket at his feet. And something he couldn't name settled over him. Not guilt exactly, but the particular dread of a man who has just discovered the score was never as close as he thought. The house changed after that morning. Not loudly. Declan wouldn't have noticed if he weren't the kind of man who paid close attention to everything market sentiment room temperature. But it was there. A quietness that wasn't peaceful, just controlled. He left at 7:45 in a charcoal suit, Montegrappa pen clipped in his breast pocket. He kissed the air near Clara's cheek. He waved at Noah, who was already focused on something at the kitchen table, and lifted a hand without looking up. "Big week," Declan said, hand on the door. "Board's flying in from San Francisco." Clara nodded. "Of course." By noon, the house was still. Noah was at school. The dishwasher hummed. Austin's sun poured across the pale limestone floors, catching dust that hadn't been visible before. Clara was gathering laundry from the master bedroom. She had done this for years. The invisible maintenance of a house that looked effortless because someone worked to make it so when she reached into the breast pocket of the jacket he'd worn the night before. Her fingers found paper. Not a business card. A receipt. She unfolded it. 4 Seasons Austin. Rooftop bar and lounge. Date the previous evening. Time 1:53 a.m. 2 signature cocktails. 1 bottle of Cristal Executive Reservation. Total $2,400. Clara read it twice, then a third time. $2,400. That was more than 13 months of Noah's violin lessons. The lessons Declan had called an unnecessary expense back in the spring. She didn't cry. She walked to the kitchen island and set the receipt flat on the limestone, smoothed the fold down with 2 fingers like she was preserving a document. Then she opened her laptop. At 1:53 a.m., Noah had already been asleep for 3 hours. She pulled up the calendar for Marsh Biosciences. Investor Relations Board dinners scheduled client events. She knew where to look. She'd helped build the scheduling infrastructure years ago before she stepped back from the firm to be home for Noah. Thursday night, nothing. No Dallas client dinner, no investor event, no board call. Clara closed the laptop slowly. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was structure, and Declan had just left the first door wide open. She did not confront him that night. She made dinner. She asked Noah about his science project. She listened to Declan talk about pre-IPO pressure and NASDAQ positioning as if those words explained the exhaustion in his voice, and she waited. At 11:30 p.m., when the shower turned on in the master bath, steam filling the glass enclosure, water pressure masking everything, Clara picked up her phone. She didn't look at his messages. She searched her memory. Vivian Park, Corporate Communications Director, always at the firm events, always exactly where she needed to be. Clara opened Instagram. Vivian's account was public. The most recent post, 12 hours ago, the rooftop bar. A champagne flute raised toward the Austin skyline, the Capitol Dome lit gold below Lady Bird Lake, a dark ribbon beyond. The caption, "To New Beginnings." Timestamp 1:58 a.m. Clara zoomed in on the photo. Reflected in the glass wall behind the champagne flute was a silhouette. Tall. Broad shoulders, charcoal suit jacket draped over the back of his chair. She didn't need confirmation. She had it. The receipt sat folded in her bedside drawer now. Clara set her phone face down on the nightstand, just as the shower cut off. Declan emerged, towel at his waist, expression easy. "Everything okay?" he asked. She looked up at him. "Yes," she said. "Everything's clear." Something shifted in his eyes for a fraction of a second. Not guilt assessment. Measuring how much she knew. Clara smiled faintly and reached for the book on her nightstand. The 48 Laws of Power. She opened it to a page she'd already read. She didn't look at him again. But inside her something had turned over, quiet, precise, and irreversible. This wasn't heartbreak. It was the moment before strategy. The following Tuesday, Declan began narrating his schedule out loud. Clara noticed it immediately. He stood at the kitchen island Tuesday morning, scrolling his phone, speaking into the room without being asked. "Investor dinner Thursday," he said, casual as weather. "NASDAQ crowd, pre-IPO positioning." Clara poured Noah's orange juice. "Where?" "Private room. It's a standing reservation." She smiled. "Sounds important." "It is." He watched her just a beat too long. After they left, Clara walked straight to the study. Her old laptop powered on with a soft hum. The Marsh Biosciences Investor Relations portal was still accessible with her legacy credentials. She'd never been formally removed from the back-end access, a detail Declan had apparently forgotten. She checked the event calendar. Thursday blank. No private dinner, no NASDAQ meeting, no reservation under corporate accounts. She checked the SEC pre-filing disclosures. Her eyes slowed. There. Filed quietly. 6 weeks prior, Marsh Biosciences Holdings Limited, a Cayman Islands intermediary, inserted above the original holding structure. She almost missed it. Almost. Her phone buzzed. A text from Declan. "Late prep tonight, too. Don't wait up." Clara stared at those 3 words. Don't wait up used to mean ambition, building something together. Now it meant something else entirely, and she was only beginning to understand exactly what. From down the hall, Noah's voice, "Mom, can you help me find my math folder?" She closed the laptop gently. "Coming, baby." But as she stood, she glanced one more time at that blank square on Thursday's calendar and at the Cayman entity name sitting quietly in the filing like a stone dropped in still water. Declan thought he was controlling the narrative. He had forgotten something critical. Clara had helped build it, and she was starting to see exactly where the edits had been made. Drop your comment below. Have you ever seen someone underestimated the way Clara was? I want to know. And don't go anywhere, this is about to shift. Thursday came fast. Declan left at 6:45 p.m. charcoal suit, a cologne he didn't usually wear on weeknights. He kissed Noah's head. He avoided Clara's eyes. "Don't wait up," he said a third time now, as if repetition made it true. "Of course," she said pleasantly. By 8:30, Noah was asleep. The house sat wrapped in quiet. Austin sprawled beyond the windows, light rising from the Congress Avenue corridor, the Capitol dome glowing pale gold in the distance. Clara stood at the living room window, lights dimmed phone in hand. She wasn't checking Vivian's Instagram. She was watching the street. At 8:51 p.m., a dark gray Escalade idled at the corner of their private road. It had been there the evening before, too. And the evening before that, not a neighbor, not a food delivery waiting. A car that sat and watched. Her pulse slowed, not quickened. At 9:07 p.m., the driver's door opened briefly. A man in a polo shirt stepped out, glanced at his phone, then scanned the entrance to the property before returning to the vehicle. Clara's phone buzzed. Declan's credit card notification, a shared account he'd set up years ago for household transparency. Four Seasons Austin, Executive Suite, 9:01 p.m. She looked back at the Escalade, and something clicked. Declan wasn't just lying, he was preparing. A CEO 5 days from the biggest IPO of his career didn't risk scandal without building insulation first. That car wasn't coincidence, it was documentation. If Clara reacted emotionally, if she made a scene or called an attorney publicly, he could frame her as unstable, unraveling. The grieving wife who couldn't handle the pressure of a landmark moment. She exhaled slowly. Her reflection in the dark glass looked unfamiliar, calmer, sharper. Declan thought he was gathering evidence. He had no idea she had just started doing the same. On Friday morning, Clara did something Declan would never expect. She invited him to dinner. "Perla's," she said over breakfast, sliding Noah a waffle. "South Congress. It's been a while." Declan looked up from his phone. a flicker of something across his face there and gone. Tonight, if you're free. A pause. He measured her. Then he smiled, controlled, confident. Sure, let's do it. At 7:30 that evening, they sat across from each other at a candlelit table by the window, the South Congress streetlights glowing amber outside a bougainvillea cascading from the patio trellis beyond the glass. Declan ordered a bottle of Texas Hill Country Red without asking her preference. Clara didn't object. You've been quiet lately, he said, swirling his glass. Everything okay? Very, she replied. He studied her, waiting for motion. Clara reached into her handbag, unhurried, deliberate, and placed a single folded receipt on the white tablecloth between them. 4 Seasons Austin. Rooftop bar. 1:53 a.m. Declan's hand went still. That was an investor meeting, he said immediately. At 1:53 in the morning, she asked almost gently. He leaned back, composed. High-level negotiations don't keep bankers' hours, Clara. She nodded once, as if considering the logic. Then she slid her phone across the table. Vivian's Instagram photo filled the screen. Champagne flute lifted toward the Capitol Dome, to new beginnings. 1:58 a.m. Declan didn't touch the phone. He didn't deny it. Instead, he pivoted. You've been going through my things. I've been paying attention, she said evenly. For the first time that evening, the candlelight between them didn't feel warm. It felt like exposure. And Declan realized something he hadn't prepared for. This dinner wasn't an accusation. It was a warning. The email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Subject line, Noah just checking in. Clara was at the kitchen island, her laptop open. It was from Ms. Delgado, Noah's 3rd grade teacher. Nothing to be alarmed about, but I wanted to share something from our My Family drawing activity. There was an attachment. Clara clicked. 3 figures stood on a green patch of crayon grass. In the center, a small boy holding a woman's hand. To the left, a tall figure drawn in blue, separate, unconnected. No hand reaching out. No smile drawn in. Above the blue figure in Noah's careful handwriting were 5 words. Dad works somewhere else now. Clara's throat tightened. She didn't cry. She zoomed in. Noah had erased and redrawn the gap between the figures. Twice faint gray smudge marks showed where he'd widened the distance. Her phone buzzed. A financial news alert. Marsh Biosciences IPO expected to price above $34 per share, top of range. Declan was winning in public. The teacher's email continued. When I asked Noah why Dad was so far away, he said, he doesn't like being here much. Clara closed her eyes, just for a moment, steadying herself. This was no longer about infidelity or even the Cayman filing. This was about erosion, about a child quietly adjusting his expectations downward, redrawing the distance with a crayon because that was the only tool he had. Her phone buzzed again. Declan dinner ran long. Staying at the hotel tonight. She looked at the drawing. Dad works somewhere else now. Clara saved the image to a private folder. Evidence didn't always arrive on letterhead. Sometimes it came in crayon, and she was beginning to understand that the most honest account of this marriage wasn't being written by either of the adults inside it. Vivian Park believed she was stepping into a future not inheriting a disaster. That was how she held it in her mind as she stood inside Declan's office late Saturday evening, heels quiet on the polished concrete floor, Austin spreading in every direction beyond the glass. She watched him pour 2 glasses of bourbon from the decanter he reserved for serious conversations. You can't keep living like this, she said softly. He handed her a glass. Living like what? Married. He gave a quiet laugh. It's not that simple. Vivian studied him carefully. She had managed the public images of executives twice his age. She understood timing. The IPO was 4 days out. Optics mattered. You told me it was already over, she reminded him. It is, Declan said. Clara just doesn't know it yet. The sentence sat in the air between them. She moved closer, voice low. And when she does, Declan took a slow sip. It'll be handled. She didn't miss the word. Handled. Not discussed. Not resolved. Managed. Her phone lit up on the glass desk. A message from a financial journalist she sometimes worked with off the record. Rumors of trouble in the Marsh household. Worth exploring. Vivian glanced at Declan. He was staring at the skyline, calculating something only he could see. She typed back, Hold. Timing matters. She turned to him. You need to control the narrative before someone else does. Declan smiled faintly. I always do. But somewhere across the city in a cedar and glass house above the lake, Clara Marsh was building her own file, and Vivian, for the first time, felt something cold move through her professional confidence. She hadn't been standing beside a man choosing her. She had been standing beside a man choosing himself, and men like that didn't protect anyone for long. Clara did not call a divorce attorney. She called a securities lawyer. Monday morning, after dropping Noah at school, she drove into downtown Austin, not to the family courts on 11th Street, past them, and into a quieter office tower on Congress Avenue. Marcus Webb still kept his office on the 19th floor. His receptionist recognized her name immediately. He'll want to see you. Marcus hadn't changed much in 6 years. Silver at his temples now, wire-rimmed glasses, the same deliberate stillness that had once made opposing counsel visibly nervous. He stood when she entered. Clara Marsh, he said. I figured you'd walk back into a room like this eventually. She didn't waste time. She placed 3 documents on his desk. The 4 Seasons receipt, a printed screenshot of Vivian's Instagram post, and a copy of the most recent Marsh Biosciences pre-IPO filing. I'm not here about the affair, she said. I'm here about asset movement. Marcus leaned back slightly. Clara opened her leather portfolio. I helped structure Marsh Biosciences in its early years. The original holding entities were domestic. 6 weeks ago, a Cayman intermediary appeared in the SEC pre-filing. She slid a document forward. Marsh Biosciences Holdings Limited registered 7 weeks before IPO pricing. Marcus's eyes sharpened. You're certain? I checked the registry this morning. He studied the document. The IPO is in 4 days. And if he's shifting equity position before valuation locks, minority stakeholders won't see the dilution until after the bell rings. She paused. Including me. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You understand what you're implying? Yes, Clara said. I'm implying he believes he's untouchable. Marcus folded his hands on the desk. What do you want from me? Clara didn't hesitate. I want to know if I'm right. Outside the window, Congress Avenue hummed with mid-morning traffic. Inside that office, something more dangerous than heartbreak had just entered the room. Strategy. If you're still here, thank you. Leave a comment what moment made you stop trusting Declan, because it matters. Now, back to Clara. Marcus did not give her comfort. He gave her silence. After reviewing the Cayman registration documents, he removed his glasses slowly. If this is structured the way I think it is, he said, he's diluting visibility before valuation locks. It's not automatically illegal, but the timing is aggressive. And the non-disclosure to spousal equity holders is a separate question entirely. Clara nodded. He never makes accidental moves. Do you have proof of intent? That was the question. Clara exhaled quietly. Not yet. She drove back to Westlake with something heavier than fear. Memory. Years ago, when Marsh Biosciences was nothing but a leased lab space near the UT campus and 2 borrowed desks in a shared co-working building, she had drafted the original equity structure on her laptop. Declan had called her the real architect, said it in front of the first investors with something that looked like pride. She hadn't thought about that in years. At home, she went to the back of her closet. A gray storage bin beneath winter coats. Her old external hard drive still in its padded case. She plugged it into her laptop. Folders appeared. 2016 formation docs. 2017 early equity agreements. Cap table _V1. Her hands were steady. She opened the earliest capitalization table. Simple. Transparent. Domestic holding only. Then she pulled up the most recent pre-filing. The ownership percentages looked similar, almost identical, except one entity had been quietly inserted at the top of the chain. Marsh Biosciences Holdings Limited. She scrolled further. An amendment clause. Digitally signed. The metadata showed the document had been modified on the night Declan claimed to be at a board retreat in San Antonio. She checked the timestamp. 12:14 a.m. The same night Vivian had posted from the Four Seasons. Clara sat back slowly. This wasn't just an affair. This was coordination. Declan hadn't been hiding a relationship and a business decision separately. They were part of the same architecture. Keep Clara emotionally managed, legally uninformed, and financially diluted before the biggest payday of his career. He hadn't just been hiding an affair. He had been hiding leverage. And for the first time since the model rocket broke on the floor, she understood exactly what this was. Declan came home early. That alone was unusual enough to notice. Clara and Noah were at the kitchen island working through math homework. When the front door opened at 5:22 p.m., no hotel excuse. No, don't wait up. Declan walked in carrying a small blue box Kendra Scott Austin made expensive. He set it gently on the counter like a peace offering. For you, he said. Noah looked up. Did you miss dinner? Declan smiled tightly. Not tonight, buddy. Clara studied the box without touching it. What's the occasion? Declan leaned against the island, relaxed, rehearsed. I've been distracted. IPO pressure. I haven't been present. I'm fixing that. Fixing. She lifted the lid. Inside, a delicate gold necklace with a topaz pendant, understated, beautiful, expensive. The kind that said, apology without saying, I'm sorry. It's beautiful, she said softly. Declan moved closer. I don't want distance between us. We're a family. He reached for her hand. After the IPO, we'll take a real trip. Maybe Big Bend or the coast, just us three. Noah quietly closed his workbook and excused himself from the room, that precise, intuitive reading children have of adult weather. The kitchen felt smaller without him. Declan lowered his voice. I need stability right now, Clara. Investors watch everything. I can't have disruption. There it was. Not love. Optics. Clara clasped the necklace around her neck and felt the cool metal settle at her collarbone. You're right, she said evenly. No disruption. Relief moved across his face. He kissed her forehead and headed upstairs. Clara stood still for a moment. Then she unclasped the necklace and set it back in its velvet box. A gift given before confession wasn't reconciliation. It was insurance. And Declan had just confirmed the one thing she needed to know. He wasn't afraid of losing her love. He was afraid of losing control of her silence. It happened on a Sunday morning, not during an argument, not during tension, over waffles. Declan was at the stove, a rare and performed domesticity flipping batter with careful attention, while Noah sat at the island swinging his legs. Clara poured coffee into her white ceramic mug and watched the scene the way you watch something that looks normal but isn't quite right. Dad, Noah said. Declan smiled without turning. Yeah, bud. Are you and Mom mad at each other because of me? The spatula froze mid-air. Clara set her mug down before it slipped. Declan turned slowly. What number? Of course not. Why would you think that? Noah shrugged eyes on the syrup bottle. Because when I mess up at school, teachers don't smile the same way after. They smile like they're trying. Declan forced a short laugh. That's not the same thing. But you smile trying now. Noah said, still calm. Like when you lie about surprises. The kitchen went absolutely quiet. No accusation, no drama. Just a child who had been watching adults long enough to name what he saw. Clara's eyes moved to Declan. She said nothing because this wasn't hers to correct. This was truth meeting ego. Declan set the spatula down. I don't lie. Noah looked up at him. Yes, you do. Not angry, not tearful, just certain. Declan glanced at Clara, searching for support, for intervention, for someone to restore the comfortable fiction. She looked back at him with steady, clear eyes. Nothing. Noah slid off his stool. It's okay, he added gently. I just wanted to know. He walked upstairs without another word. Declan stood in the kitchen, shoulders rigid. Clara spoke quietly into the silence. You can't outmaneuver honesty, she said. Not the kind that comes from him. For the first time since the IPO countdown began, something genuinely unsteady entered Declan's expression. Because children don't negotiate narratives, they expose them. IPO day arrived dressed in gold. Austin shimmered under a pale October sun. Local news cameras lined the sidewalk outside Marsh Bioscience's glass tower on West 6th. Inside the Westlake home, the morning was unnervingly still. Declan stood in the hallway mirror adjusting his tie, impeccable in a tailored navy suit, tag here gleaming. This was the culmination. Everything he had built crystallized into one opening bell. Big day, he said almost to himself. Clara stood by the window, Noah's backpack at her feet. Yes, she replied. It is. Declan checked his phone. Messages flooding in board members, investors, media confirmations. After this, he added, turning toward her, everything stabilizes. Clara didn't respond. Instead, she crossed to the entry table and placed a slim manila envelope on the limestone surface beside his keys. Declan looked down. What's that? Read it. He frowned slightly, then opened the envelope. Inside 2 documents. A formal petition for divorce filed that morning, and a notice of financial disclosure request submitted to the SEC regarding undisclosed offshore equity transfers in connection with the pending Marsh Biosciences IPO. His eyes moved fast, then again. You filed this. His voice was controlled but thinner. At 8:03 a.m., she said. Before the market opens. The clock on the wall read 9:06. The opening bell was in 24 minutes. Declan looked at her, disbelief pushing through composure. Do you understand what today is? Yes, Clara said. That's why timing matters. You're threatening the company. No, she said gently. I'm protecting what's legally mine. His jaw tightened. This will trigger scrutiny. It already deserves scrutiny. From the staircase, Noah appeared watching quietly, saying nothing. Declan dropped his voice. Clara, this is reckless. No, she said one more time. It's precise. Outside, the city buzzed. News anchors prepared to broadcast. Investors refreshed their screens. Inside the house, something far more consequential had already begun. Declan picked up his keys slowly, realization arriving in fragments. The bell hadn't rung yet, but Clara had already made the first move. At 9:30 a.m., the opening bell rang. Declan stood inside Marsh Biosciences headquarters, cameras flashing the company logo illuminated across the massive LED screen behind him. Applause. Ticker symbols going live. The stock opened strong. He exhaled. Control restored. Then his phone vibrated. Once. Twice. 6 times in rapid succession. SEC inquiry filed. Offshore equity disclosure questions surface pre-IPO. Marsh Biosciences trading volatility. Declan's smile didn't disappear. It froze. A board member leaned close. "What's this about a Cayman entity? Standard structuring," Declan said, keeping his voice even. But the second surge never came. The price hesitated, dipped. Financial reporters began adjusting their language mid-broadcast. Unconfirmed regulatory review. Possible disclosure concerns. Across town, Clara sat at the dining table, her laptop open. Noah's drawing rested beside her like a quiet anchor. She wasn't watching the stock for revenge. She was watching for accountability. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus." "It's live," he said calmly. Regulators flagged the filing within 12 minutes. Timing was right. Clara glanced at the clock. 9:49 a.m. On the financial news running silently behind Marcus's office window, Declan's face appeared composed, answering questions. Full transparency. Standard structuring. The stock dropped 8%, then 23%. By 10:07 a.m., trading was temporarily halted. Back at the tower, the applause was gone. Board members huddled. Legal counsel moved in tight, urgent clusters, and Declan stood alone for a moment near the glass wall overlooking the city, the view he had spent a decade working toward. He had anticipated risk. He had not anticipated precision. Because this wasn't chaos. It was exposure. He had placed that tag Hewer on the entry table in the dark of 5:09 a.m., believing silence could protect him. He had no idea that all along Clara had been the one who actually understood how structures were built and how they could be dismantled. By noon, the story had shifted. Financial networks were no longer celebrating Marsh Biosciences' debut. Phrases like regulatory review and pre-IPO equity restructuring scrolled across lower thirds. Inside her office on West 6th Vivian Park stared at her phone 29 missed messages. 2 from major investors. 1 from the journalist she'd told to hold. "Were you aware of the offshore dilution?" She dialed Declan. He answered on the third ring. "Tell me this is noise," she said. "It's procedural," he replied. "Clara filed something. It'll settle." Vivian walked to the window. "You said she didn't know." "She didn't," he snapped. "She overreacted." "Overreacted?" Vivian's voice dropped. "She filed with the SEC before the opening bell, Declan." Silence. That silence said more than everything else. "You told me it was clean," she said quietly. "You told me the offshore entity was temporary." "It is." "Then why wasn't it disclosed?" Another pause. Vivienne felt the floor tilt beneath her. She had built her entire career on managing perception, not defending deception, and she had walked into this believing she knew all the variables. She had miscalculated the wife. Because Clara wasn't emotional, she was surgical. At 2:03 p.m., the Marsh Biosciences boardroom doors closed. 12 people around a long walnut table. Austin's skyline indifferent behind the glass, doing what skylines do, simply existing while things fell apart inside. Declan stood at the head of the table, composed, controlled, unapologetic. "This is temporary volatility," he began. The offshore entity was strategic tax positioning, fully legal, and within standard structuring parameters. A senior board member leaned forward. "Legal doesn't mean invisible." The general counsel cleared her throat. "Regulators are requesting immediate documentation. The timing raises questions about disclosure intent." "Intent was optimization," Declan said. Another board member slid a document across the table, not from regulators, from a minority investor group. They were invoking a governance clause. Emergency leadership review under material transparency concerns. Declan recognized the language. He had signed that clause. He had signed it when the company was small enough that he believed no one would ever use it against him. "Who initiated this?" he demanded. The answer came calmly. "Marcus Webb, represents the group. Something dropped in Declan's stomach, but his expression didn't move. Outside, alerts flashed Marsh Biosciences shares down 27% amid governance review. The chairman folded his hands. Declan. A long pause. We need to consider temporary executive restructuring until this is resolved. Not a firing. Not yet. But distance. Declan scanned the room. No one held his gaze for long. Not the investors who had toasted him that morning. Not Vivian, seated near the end of the table, staring at the middle distance. He understood something then, something that didn't fit neatly into any financial model he'd ever built. Reputation wasn't ownership. It was permission. And permission could be revoked. At 3:17 p.m., by a vote of 9-3, Declan Marsh was placed on immediate administrative leave pending regulatory review. The skyline hadn't changed. Inside that glass tower, everything else had. If you've made it this far, you already know this story isn't about revenge. Drop a comment. What's the word for what Clara did? Because I've heard strength, I've heard integrity, I've heard something people take a lifetime to learn. 3 weeks later, the federal courtroom in downtown Austin felt colder than any boardroom Declan had ever stood in. No cameras, no tickers. Just wooden benches, the low sound of a clerk's keyboard, and the unhurried authority of a judge who had seen every version of this story and had no interest in performing sympathy. Declan sat beside his attorney suit, immaculate expression disciplined. The administrative leave had quietly become a formal removal pending investigation. The stock had found a floor, but he wasn't in the building anymore. Across the aisle, Clara sat beside Marcus, calm, focused, not triumphant. Judge Renata Okafor reviewed the filings carefully. Mr. Marsh, she began, evidence before this court indicates undisclosed equity transfers to an offshore intermediary prior to IPO valuation at a time when marital assets were commingled with corporate holdings. Declan's attorney rose. All transfers were technically lawful under lawful structuring does not negate spousal rights, the judge said without softening. Clara did not look at Declan. She didn't need to. The financial records had been subpoenaed. Email metadata confirmed the timestamps. The digital signature on the amendment clause matched the night of the claimed San Antonio retreat, the same night Vivian had posted from the Four Seasons. Intent had become visible. The ruling was measured. Primary residential custody to Clara. Structured visitation for Declan. Full financial transparency mandated going forward. And most significantly, Clara retained her original equity percentage based on pre-transfer valuation. Not the diluted version he had tried to lock in. The original. At $22 per share against a stock that had since stabilized at $31, the difference was considerable. Declan's breath shifted slightly when he heard that. Precision. Judge Okafor closed the file. Marriage, she said evenly, is not a strategic instrument. It carries fiduciary responsibility to a partner and to the truth. Outside the courthouse steps were quiet. No press. No assistants waiting. No car idling at the curb. Clara stepped into the cool October air. Noah's small hand slid into hers. He looked up at her sideways, then back at the steps, then ahead at the street, deciding something. "Can we go to Barton Springs?" he asked. She smiled. "Yeah, we can." Declan exited the building a few moments later. For the first time in years, there was no entourage, no next meeting. Just a man in an expensive suit standing still. In that stillness, something arrived that he'd been outrunning for a long time. He hadn't lost everything in a single morning. He had been losing it slowly, incrementally, one "don't wait up" at a time, and he had simply never noticed when it started. October settled over Zilker Park, the way good seasons do, quietly without announcing itself. The grass along Barton Creek was still green despite the cooling air. Leaves from the cypress trees drifted down into the water. Noah ran ahead on the trail, laughing at something invisible to anyone but him. Clara walked a few steps behind a light jacket over her shoulders, her phone in her pocket, and mostly forgotten. For the first time in months, maybe longer, the air felt breathable. Not because everything was resolved, but because nothing was hidden. Her phone buzzed once. A notification from her newly registered firm, Webb and Marsh Legal Advisory, LLC. Their first major client had signed that morning. Corporate governance review. Irony had a quiet sense of humor. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and watched Noah crouch beside the creek examining something in the shallow water with complete absorption. "Mom," he called. "Look, it's a crawdad." She crouched beside him. He cupped his hands around it, carefully showing her without trapping it. "It's not scared," he observed. "No," she agreed. "It's just doing what it does." He released it back into the water and watched it dart sideways into the shade of a rock. Then he looked up at her, that same unsettling, clear-eyed directness. "Are you happier now?" The question wasn't heavy. It was curious. The way he asked about everything. Clara didn't answer immediately. She let the breeze move between them. The water ran over the rocks. "Yes," she said finally. "I am." Noah nodded once, satisfied the way he was when a fact was confirmed, and turned back to the creek. Marcus Webb appeared on the trail behind her carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. Not dramatic, not urgent, just steady. "No depositions today," he said, handing one over. "No," she replied. "Just trees." They stood together, watching Noah rebuild a small dam out of flat stones, patient, methodical, starting over twice when it collapsed, never frustrated. Clara thought about power then. Not the kind measured in equity percentages or board votes, the quiet kind. The kind that knows when to wait and when to act. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. She thought about a note on a coffee table. 4 words in careful handwriting. She thought about a broken model rocket. And she understood something she hadn't had words for until now. Peace wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the presence of clarity. And for the first time since 5:09 a.m., changed everything. The silence around her wasn't tense. It was earned. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Declan came to pick Noah up for his scheduled weekend visit. No driver, no assistant. Just Declan at the front door of the house he no longer owned, hands in his coat pockets waiting. Clara opened the door. There was no hostility between them, only the specific clarity of people who have finally said everything that needed saying. "Hi, Dad," Noah said, appearing from the living room. Declan's eyes moved past him automatically and then stopped. There it was on the coffee table, the model rocket, repaired. Not perfectly, the seam along the fuselage was faintly visible, the balsa fins a shade misaligned on one side. But it was whole. The nose cone was reattached. The motor casing was clean. Noah picked it up and held it carefully. "Mom helped me fix it," he said. Declan swallowed. "Yeah." Noah nodded. Then, in that same quiet, even tone he used when stating simple facts, "We didn't throw it away." The words were plain, but they carried the weight of everything this story had been. Clara stood near the staircase, watching without interference. Declan crouched slowly, meeting his son's eyes at level. "I'm sorry about before," he said. Quietly. No audience, no framing. Just truth offered without strategy for possibly the first time. Noah considered him for a moment. "It's okay," he said. "We fixed it." Not forgiveness, not erasure. Acknowledgement. Declan rose. He understood what the rocket meant not as a symbol, but as a fact. Some things break and can be repaired, and the repair is visible, and that's not a flaw. It's just the honest shape of the thing after. As Noah walked out the door beside him, Declan glanced back once. Clara stood in the doorway, calm, composed, no longer waiting for anything to be explained. She hadn't won by destroying him. She had won by refusing to disappear. by choosing precision over reaction, structure over chaos, and her son's steady hand over the comfort of a borrowed peace. The door closed gently behind them. The house behind her felt lighter. Inside, her firm was growing. Outside, Barton Springs waited for another quiet walk. And one truth remained simple and undeniable as a 4-word note on a coffee table. Integrity rebuilds what ambition destroys. And if you're still here, you know this story was never really about the stock crash or the courtroom or even the affair. It was about that moment in the kitchen on a Sunday morning when a child looked his father in the eye and said simply, "Yes, you do." No anger, no performance, just truth. Stoic philosophy gives us something to hold on to in moments like that. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Clara never tried to control Declan's choices. She controlled her response, and that made everything that followed possible. Self-respect is not loud, it is steady. It waits. And when the moment is right, it acts with precision, not anger. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel seen or steadier, or just a little more certain that integrity is worth the cost, take a moment and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're still here right now, maybe that means you're rebuilding something too. That matters more than you know.